Want to know what the books are saying in Vegas?
May the odds be ever in your favor.
It's time to go inside the numbers with Doug Kazarian.
That's right. It's Countdown to Kickoff on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Time for a little betting action. Matt Jones, Meyer Mick.
All right, everybody, good Sunday morning. Welcome in. Justin Kinner interrupting your morning. Just briefly, we're going to be live at Frickers for the Sunday morning tailgate show for the live reveal of the College Football Playoff Rankings, the final reveal of the College Football Playoff Rankings coming up here later on today. We'll be live at Frickers in Miamisburg. Kev Nash and myself, of course, will be getting you set for all the big NFL matchups, of course. But I'm excited because the day is finally here, Selection Sunday, and I can think of no better person to help us get geared up for the release of the final College Football Playoff Rankings than our next guest. Live here, ESPN's Heather Dinich. Heather, good morning. Welcome. We appreciate your time today.
Good morning. Of course. Thank you for having me on.
So there's a lot of crazy scenarios happening. This is what I love about the 14 playoff is the chaos. And although there's not as much chaos as what I was anticipating, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the potential matchups we could see early on. We're an ESPN affiliate here in Dayton. We're also an Ohio State Buckeye affiliate here in Dayton. So we're all anxious. I think it's safe to say Ohio State is in, correct, Heather?
I think that's fair. And the reason is because that fifth ranking on this past Tuesday was so important because the selection committee had Ohio State at 5 ahead of Alabama. Their resumes clearly aren't going to change. The one thing that I'm 100% sure of is that Ohio State has the edge over Alabama and will maintain that edge. And when USC lost to Utah on Friday night in the Pac-12 championship game, that was exactly what the Buckeyes needed. And now I think the conversation turns to, can they jump TCU? Does the selection committee give any credence to Alabama getting in with Ohio State at the expense of TCU? I think that's highly unlikely, but I think the Buckeyes should be feeling pretty good about their chances.
TCU at 3, and obviously, they lose a close one in overtime. But, it's interesting, though, because we put up this barrier around TCU now. We say, well, they lost by 3, but it was in their conference championship game. But if Ohio State or Michigan or anyone else would have lost to a 3 or 4 loss team, we would be, a little critical, right? We'd be saying, hey, that should take a hit against, the eye test or against the resume. Is the fact that because they lost, regardless of the opponent, because it is the conference championship game, is that why TCU is being viewed as still pretty safe in this scenario? And do you see them staying at 3 or, should they drop back? I mean, it is unreal. It is kind of crazy to think about a team getting a loss, even if it isn't a conference championship game, and then not even moving a bit. Your thoughts on that scenario there?
Well, the points that you are presenting in that question are exactly what they will be talking about in that selection committee meeting room. But I think it's less about them playing in the conference championship game and more about the fact the team they lost to is the committee's number 10 team. Regardless of if K-State has 3 losses, the selection committee thinks they're one of the 10 best teams in the country. And so to lose in overtime by a field goal to a team they beat during the regular season factors into that conversation. Because even though TCU lost that game, for the Frogs to be able to sit there and say, hey, we have a regular season win against the Big 12 champs, that win is better than any win Ohio State and Alabama have on their resume. Because you could argue that Ohio State's best win is against Penn State. The selection committee loves their win against Notre Dame in the season opener. I was there for that game. But at the end of the day, who did you beat in the CFP's top 25? I have a feeling that they could value the win against K-State more than Ohio State's win against Penn State, which would help them justify sticking at that number 3 spot. But you're absolutely right. They could drop. They could drop behind Ohio State. But whether or not they do will not be because of an avoidance of rematches, because the CFP committee does not try to avoid rematches in the semifinals. So it is possible that Ohio State and Michigan could play again.
And that was the next question I was kind of leading towards, because I think that's what a lot of Ohio State fans are very anxious about. Look, I think coming into the season, if you talked about an Ohio State-Georgia matchup, we'd be really, really excited. But Ohio State fans a little frustrated, a little upset. They want that rematch opportunity with that team up north. On a scale of 1 to 10, Heather, before we send you out, how likely do you think it is that Ohio State could be at 3 and set up that rematch with Ohio State-Michigan in the semifinals?
Man, I lean towards TCU at that number 3 spot. But here's the thing, the way the committee views that loss to Michigan, this isn't like Tennessee losing to South Carolina. Oh, Michigan owned the second half, but anyone watching that game in the first half had no idea who was going to win that game. And it was to the selection committee's number 2 team. That's important too. So who you lost to, how you lost, all plays into the conversation. It can certainly happen that Ohio State gets that number 3 spot. But as we sit here today, my gut leans towards TCU, but we'll see what they do.
Last night, Nick Saban going on at halftime of the Big Ten championship game. It's always, it's real entertaining. I love when the coaches kind of campaign for their teams, but how much weight does that have on swaying the committee? Is that just public perception that's really impacting more than anything? How much weight does it, have when coaches go and campaign for their teams? I mean, Nick Saban does it better than anybody of all. I mean, he's the GOAT for a lot of reasons, but I always give him credit. I wish Ryan Day and others did more of this, where they were just more visible and more outspoken about why they believe their team should be in. How much weight does that have, in your opinion, Heather, when coaches are very outspoken and are very visible during these times campaigning for their teams?
It doesn't, quite honestly, impact the selection committee, because as soon as that Big Ten championship game is over, they get up from their seats where they're watching these games together, and they physically move into the next room, and they're not watching SportsCenter, they're not watching the post-game shows, whatever it might be, and all the yapping and talking. The coaches are doing what they're supposed to be doing and advocating for their teams. And Nick Saban certainly got a boatload of airtime on multiple networks to do that for his team. But what's interesting is, if he was the one with 1 loss sitting there and there was another team on the outside with 2 losses, I highly doubt he would have the same opinion of that 2-loss team as he does.
No doubt. All right, Heather, this is the last thing I'm sending you out with. I got ripped last week for an opinion I had that if I'm TCU and I'm USC, you have more to lose than win playing in a conference championship game. When the last college football playoff rankings came out, the committee already said, you're our top 4. You are our playoff 4. Ohio State can make it without playing in a game. I know these are common criticisms of the 14 playoff from the very beginning, but I mean, I said, hey, if I'm USC, I opt out. If I'm TCU, I opt out. I know they contractually kind of have to play, but I mean, do you hear those talking points a lot where, man, I know conference championships are important, but at the end of the day, the playoffs are more important. It's a weird visual seeing teams almost get punished for playing an extra game. USC out of the playoff now because they played an extra game when, hey, I don't want to play in my conference championship game. I'd rather just go right through to the playoffs.
Right. Well, and TCU coach Sonny Dykes said that in his post-game press conference. Exactly that. We shouldn't be punished for playing in our conference championship game. Now, the flip side of that is people who would say, well, if you're one of the 4 best teams in the conference, win it. Right. And in the 12-team playoffs, the 6 highest ranked conference champions will be in the college football playoff. But you are right in that if teams are sitting on their couch with nothing to lose, while other teams are putting it all on the line, and the ones on the couch get in, the optics of that certainly raise questions. But it would not be the first time that we've seen both Ohio State and Alabama get into the college football playoff without winning their divisions. 2016, Ohio State did it. Penn State fans remember that painfully. And Alabama did it in 2017 when they lost in the Iron Bowl to Auburn, and they wound up winning the whole darn thing. So, yes, it's a fair question, but this is the way the system works, my friend. Ambiguous, subjective, and human.
Well, as a Buckeye fan, as you hear in the background, I'm fine with that. I'm actually fine with but I'm a hypocrite because if the roles were reversed, oh man, I'd be screaming from the mountaintop that something has to change. So, Heather, you are the absolute best. Thank you so much for taking time for us here this morning. For our fans listening right now, where can fans find you next? What's your next stop? I'm sure you're going to be all over SportsCenter. What's your next hit that people could find you at here this morning?
Yep, I'm on Twitter at CFB Heather, and I will be on our ranking reaction show right after the ranking, and then I'll be joining Reese and the guys at some point in the show later.
Yeah, you think, because you have no sleep right now and you're just being tugged in every direction. So there you go. Heather, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Yep, take care.
All right, good stuff. ESPN's Heather Dinich. Good stuff there. Kev Nash and I, we're going to be live at Frickers in Miamisburg coming up at 11:30. What time is it now? An hour from now. My goodness, 10:30 already. An hour from now, Kev Nash and I will be live at Frickers in Miamisburg. Come on out. The Sunday morning tailgate show. We'll be reacting to the release of the College Football Playoff Rankings live right here on 1410 ESPN Radio, live at Frickers in Miamisburg. Appreciate Heather. Heather is awesome. Give her a follow on Twitter. Good stuff there. Ohio State, Michigan. Is it possible? Could we see the rematch? Could we see Ohio State, Michigan Part 2 in the College Football Playoff? I felt more confident about it yesterday, but the more coverage I see of this College Football Playoff and the conversation we just had with Heather, I'm having a hard time believing that Ohio State's going to jump TCU. But we're going to find out. So when we talk about the committee, when they talk about, we know, I think the top 4 teams are set. I think it is Ohio State. I think it's TCU. I think it's obviously Georgia and Michigan. Actually, I don't think I know. I know Georgia and Michigan. TCU should, and I believe is in, and Ohio State's in just by, being at that 5 spot moving up. We know those 4 are in. Does it really bother anybody if they manipulate the 3 and the 4? Does it really matter? You know what I'm saying? I think that, you're going to get Georgia at Ohio State, but you can potentially get Georgia, Ohio State in the national championship game. And I know some of you are saying, well, you could get Ohio State, Michigan in the national championship game. As much as I love my Buckeyes, I'm not going to lie. Have you watched Georgia play? I don't want to hear about, they struggled against Kent State and they struggled against Missouri. Have you watched them? I'd rather not hope that we get to the title game with the chance to play Michigan. I want to kick Michigan's ass, and I want to do it right. Well, not this second, but this next game. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Ohio State College Football Playoff. Where will they be in the rankings when they come out here in about an hour and a half? We'll be live, of course, at Frickers and for the Sunday morning tailgate show. So we hope to see you there. If not, tune in, 1410 Wing AM. Have a great rest of your morning. And I can't wait to have our live reaction. Plus, we'll be talking a lot of NFL, too. Deshaun Watson, he is making his debut for the Browns today. And then the big one, the Chiefs against the Bengals, Patrick Mahomes against Joseph Burrow. So a lot of good football on coming up here today. Appreciate every one of you for listening. I know this is random. We just popped on in the middle of the morning for you. Heather had time for us this morning, and I wanted to make sure we got time with her. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your morning. We'll see you at Frickers.